So in this video, we're going to build a full stack video course platform, a full-blown Next.js application with backend database, authentication, and a video hosting service using Mox. I'm going to talk about the tech stack that we're using in this project in a second, also the sponsors. But for now, let's just from a high level see what the finished product or application would look like, and then we're going to dive into the tech stack and the architecture for the application, and then the actual code of building this together. So from a high level, you can just come into the platform, sign in. A user can learn or can also teach. We're going to go to the teaching dashboard in a second, but we have some recent courses over here that was created. We can visit the individual course page. There's descriptions, price, the creator, and some lessons for the course. One of the lessons is marked as a free lesson or a preview lesson where any user can just come in here and preview the lessons video without purchasing the course. The other ones are locked. You need to sign in to be able to purchase. I'm already signed in, so I can just go ahead and purchase a course. This is going to redirect the user back to our Stripe page where we can just put in a fake credit card with an expiry in future, a fake CVV, and also a fake postal code. This is going to then process the payment and redirect us back to a success page where we are using the session ID from Stripe, and we are retrieving this session to actually know who was the user that purchased this course and what course they have purchased. We're going to add this data to the database so we can give access to this specific user when they're trying to learn or reach the course content. So this is a success page. It has the details of what they have purchased, the billing address, and also the total that they have paid. From here, they can continue to the course content. So this is going to take them to their learning dashboard where they can access the courses that they have purchased. So this is the course or the learning dashboard where they can access the content. So there are different modules here, the introduction. You can see the video up top. The teacher on the teacher dashboard can add lesson notes. So they can add in codes or anything relevant to this lesson. And there's 3 lessons currently here, and they can access all of these lessons. Now, from a student perspective, they can click on this My Learning section. This is all the courses that they have purchased. So I've already purchased Learn React, and then I have the Learn Next.js, which I just purchased right now. So this is from a student's perspective, the My Learning section, going through different courses. They can also go and search different courses based on the name, or they can select a specific category. We don't have that many courses over here, but you get the idea. So we can sort and search for different courses, or from the homepage, you can see the recent courses that are here. The top creators are based on each creator or each teacher and how many courses they have. There's only one. You can go ahead and give this platform a try on learn.dev. There's a link in the description so you can access the live site. It's using the test for Stripe. You can use the test Stripe key to purchase any of these courses and create a course for yourself, which I'm going to show you how in a second. And then that will be added here. In future, I'm planning to also add a blogging section as well. This doesn't work right now, but teachers can go ahead and add a blog as well here. So it's a blogging and course platform where people can come in and learn and also teach others. Now, let's also go to the Teach dashboard. So see it from a teacher perspective, or if any of the users wants to teach, for now, you don't have to subscribe to become a teacher. You can just start teaching by creating a course. So you can see the courses that I've already created here. There's a profile section where you can include some information such as a short bio for yourself, links to your socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub, and your website. And this is going to show up on your profile. So when going to, let's say, this course, my information is showing up here. So that's where the profile comes in handy. I'm planning to add in this analytics tab. For now, it's just showing dummy data, but we can categorize the sales of the courses based on this specific teacher and show them how many courses they have sold, the recent sales, and the revenue. For now, it's again dummy data. So let's go to the courses where we can actually create a new course. So to create a new course, you can just add a new course. You can give it a name. Let's say learn type script, and the slug is automatically generated. We can add a little description here and give it a price. Let's say $27, and then category of TypeScript. So we create this course. It is going to redirect us back to that specific course page where we can publish the course or add lessons. Now, if you go ahead and publish a course without having any lessons, it's going to tell you that you can't publish a course without any lessons. So you need to at least have one lesson, and here you can add a lesson. So let's name this introduction and then add a lesson. This is using server actions in Next.js to create this lesson and revalidate the cache so we see this lesson on the page. We can go ahead and start editing this specific lesson on the next page where we can add descriptions, lesson videos, and some notes. So from high level, we have the free preview. This is to enable students that haven't purchased this course to be able to preview the video, just as I showed you in the course individual page. You can publish a lesson, and if you go ahead to publish a lesson that doesn't have any content, it tells you that you need to have a video for this lesson. So we're going to select the file. This is going to open up my file selector. You won't be able to see it here, unfortunately, but I'm opening up my file picker here and I'm selecting a video. You can also drag and drop. This is a file uploader from Mux, which is a video hosting platform, and a tech stack that we're using. I'm going to go over the tech stack that we're using shortly. So this is going to upload this to Mux and process it to be able to then view it over here. So we have the video for the course. We can add some notes here. This is using Novel, which is a tip-tap editor or a Notion style editor. We have a video on the channel where we talk about this editor in more details. I'm going to link into different videos when they come in handy instead of diving deep here into them. We have individual videos that talk about each one of these stacks or techs or technologies if you're using. So when it comes to building this page, I'm going to point it to the correct video. So have that in mind. You can add a text. So this is the introduction lesson for the TypeScript course. Let's leave it at that. Now that we have the content, we can go ahead and publish and save changes. This lesson is now marked as published. As you can see here, this is published. And because now we have a published lesson, we can go ahead and publish our TypeScript form. So this turns into published. Now, if I go back to my courses page, I should be able to see this Learn TypeScript. People can go through this course and purchase the course in the same manner that we already used to purchase the course. So really from a high level, when we're talking about courses in the teaching platform, you can create a new course. For each course, if you want to edit the content after you have published it, you can click this pencil icon. This is going to take you to the course page from the teacher's dashboard where you can add lessons, you can edit lessons, you can delete the lesson, or you can unpublish a course or delete a course. Now, unpublished means it won't show it to new students. If there has already been students that are enrolled in the course, you can't delete the course, so it stays there. You can just unpublish it, so it won't be visible to new students. So only previous students can continue using the course. So there are different things that you can do here. For now, once you create a course, you can't edit the content. In the next steps, maybe if you wanted to take this project further, you can just edit the content of the course, the description, the price, and the Learn TypeScript. At the end of the video, I have a section where I talk about the next steps or what else you can add to this to make it a fully usable video course platform that you can just launch on your own. So with this out of the way, let's talk about the stack that we're using. I've created this Notion page where I'm going to keep track of what I want to explain so I don't forget. So we demoed. Now, how to access the source code before we get to the tech stack. There's a link in the description where it would take you to my site, you would need to sign up using your GitHub username and email to get access or to get added to a team that I have created on the repo, where you would have access to this for free. But I just want to keep track of the people who are accessing the course. So you have to sign up to be able to access this bigger projects that we have. If you have already purchased the Next.js course that I have, you would get access to this automatically. You would be added to that team on the repo. If you're not, please reach out to me on the emails that you already know on the site so that I can add you manually. But yeah, that's how you would access the source code. So that's as far as the introduction. Let's go to the tech stack. So we're using Next.js and Vercel to deploy our application, and the deployed version is at learn.dev. So you can visit the deployed version at learn.dev. We're using Clerk for authentication. To set up Clerk as far as authentication, Next.js, I have tons of videos on the channel, from authentication to using middlewares to syncing Clerk data to your own database. There's links in the description or up in the cart to relevant videos where you can learn how to set this up. I'm going to walk through step by step and link to the videos again. But if you couldn't find them in the cart, just search on the channel for Clerk videos and you'd be able to see all of them. We're using Neon, which is a serverless Postgres for our database. We're storing all of our user data in our own database. So we're syncing Clerk data with our own database. And we're using Mux as a video hosting platform. It allows us to easily upload videos and then stream them back using a simple to use React video player. And some of these tech stacks are already sponsoring this video. Mux, Clerk, and Neon are kindly sponsoring this video. So thank you very much to all of these technologies for supporting our project, this project, and my work on the channel. There's going to be links in the description to the sponsors of this video, so check them out for sure. Let's dive into the project structure from a high level and build this application together. Now, the starting point of this application is our Next chat.cn template, where we have implemented chat.cn in Next.js using TypeScript, Tailwind CSS, and some utility packages to style our Tailwind classes and prettier RC or config. Now, this is a mini Next.js course. In a sense, we're going to learn a lot of Next.js concepts by building different pages, route handlers, webhooks, and connection to our databases and whatnot. I'm going to explain from a high level how we're going to build this. You have access to the source code on the repository. Don't copy the source code. You can just use it as a reference, try to rebuild it, recreate it yourself, use the code as a reference, and it's only then that you're going to learn the ins and outs and the details of how to build an application like this. Now, let's continue by adding authentication. For authentication, we're using Clerk, and there is a quick start guide to add Clerk into our Next.js application. There's also a video on the channel that I have done using the Clerk Core 2.0 version that you can use as a reference to implement Clerk in your application. Basically, you would install Clerk, and then you would create this middleware, which is going to run Clerk middleware, where you can also define which routes you want to protect, because in the Core 2.0, the middleware runs for every route, but it's not going to protect all the routes by default. And this is the difference between the Core 2 versus the previous version. In the previous version, Clerk would just protect all the pages out of the box, but now it doesn't. You need to specify the pages that you need to protect. For here, all the pages on the teach and on the learn is protected, so you need to sign up to be able to go to the teacher's dashboard or to your own learning dashboard. So that's doing that. The config matcher is from the Next.js middleware. It basically tells Next.js for what paths in your application this needs to run. This is basically including all the paths inside of our application. And with that, you're going to have Clerk set up. Now inside of our header, what I have done is to use the Clerk or the sign in and signed out buttons to show our user button. So if you're signed out, I'm going to show a sign in button. These are all coming in from Clerk. Again, if you're not familiar with Clerk, definitely watch the video that we have if this is too complicated. But these are drop-in components from Clerk that you can conditionally render the content. So if you're signed out, I'm going to render a sign in button. And if you're signed in, I'm going to render a user button. And the user button is this button that we've already seen here. Sorry, that's the learn.dev. Let's go back to our own local application. So this is the user button where you can manage your account, sign out, and whatnot. So this is as far as bringing Clerk functionality to our header or to our users. Now, before we move on from authentication, I just want to touch on syncing Clerk data with your database. So once a user goes in and starts creating an account for the first time, they create an account on Clerk. Now you want to sync this back into your database so you can keep track of your users, add them as teachers, courses, and the learning courses that they have. So we need to sync this back in with our own database. Now to do that in Clerk, you can use webhooks. So anytime that the user is updated, created, or deleted, you can just sync that data back in or create a webhook that sends that data back into your application. So I've created this app API, and then under the API, we have this webhooks. There's 3 different webhooks that we have for Clerk, Mux, and Stripe. We're going to explain the other 2, but for Clerk, what we're doing here is that I'm saying I'm expecting a post request. So anytime that a user is created or updated, I've defined a webhook in Clerk. So in Clerk, you can go to your dashboard. Let me just show you from a high level. If we go to learn.dev, under webhooks, we have 2 webhooks here. One is for our local development. This needs to be through ngrok, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Ngrok basically creates a tunnel to your local development so that you can expose your local dev server to the outer world with an HTTPS with a TLS connection, so webhooks can work. This is a limitation because webhooks can't send any traffic to your local dev. You need a tunnel and a public URL to set here as your webhook endpoint, and then point this to your local dev server. And we have another webhook for the live website. So you can create a webhook and select what events you want Clerk to send to your backend. Now here you can see I have this URL and then API webhooks Clerk. So it's going to send a post request to my webhook. Long story short. Again, there's a video specifically talking about syncing Clerk data with your database on the channel, linked in the description and also up in the cart. So watch that if you haven't already to know what we're doing here. What we're doing is we are first verifying that we have a secret and this webhook is coming from Clerk using a webhook secret that Clerk gives you that you can set in your local environment variables. For the local environment variables, I've included this .env.example. This is all the environment variables that you need to set for this to work. When you install Clerk, you're going to bring in your publishable key and secret key, and then you can get your webhook secret from the webhook dashboard when you're creating a new webhook. So we are bringing that in to our route handler, and these are route handlers in Next.js, equivalent of API endpoints in the pages router. So you can define or export named functions that map to HTTP verbs. So we are expecting a post request to this endpoint. We verify that this is coming from our Clerk, and then once it is, we're going to get the event data and the specific event type. If it is user created, I'm going to get the data that's sent with this event, and then I'm going to access a create user function that I have using Prisma and Neon database to create a new record in my database. So let's quickly look at this create user file. This is using Prisma.user.create and passes the data. So let's talk about our database here because we're using this function to actually write to our database. Our database is Neon, which is a serverless Postgres deployed to the cloud for you and managed automatically. There's a video on the channel where I talk about Neon and also walk through implementation in Next.js using Prisma specifically. So watch that video where I walk step by step into that implementation. We're going to talk about pooled connections. We're going to talk about the serverless SDK that Neon has. So watch that video for a better understanding of how to implement Neon in Next.js using Prisma. But from a high level, we have created a new project here, and we're using Prisma to connect to this database. Now, when you install Prisma and Prisma client, it's going to go ahead and create this schema Prisma. This is how you define the shape of the data in your application or in your database, different tables and different records that you have there. And Prisma is going to allow you to then connect to your database. In this case, in this instance, we're connecting to a pooled connection string from Neon that manages a connection pool for us so that we are not running out of connection strings from our serverless functions. And Prisma is also going to enable us to query our data from our Neon database. So from a high level, let's look at different models or different tables that we have inside of our database. So if you're using Postgres, you need to paste in your pooled connection string from Neon here for Prisma to be able to connect to your database. I've defined a user model with email Clerk user ID. This is Clerk specific ID. Remember, the users are going to authenticate with Clerk. We're going to sync that data back into our own database using a webhook. So we bring in our Clerk user ID. Stripe customer ID. Once this user becomes a customer, a student, and purchases a course, we're going to get this as Stripe customer ID, and we're going to reuse it anytime that they purchase another course. So we keep track of our students like that. First name, last name, image URL. This is what comes from Clerk. Bio is, and the rest of this information is if you decide to teach, and go to the teacher profile and update these. So they're optional. Now each user can have teaching courses. So these are courses that this specific user is teaching, and they can also enroll in other people's courses. So there are some courses that they're learning. So learning courses and teaching courses. There's going to be an array of courses. So this is a relationship field, which is connecting this specific user to many courses. So it's a one-to-many relationship here. Let's just quickly go to our courses. So each course has an ID, name, slug, description, price, whether or not it's published, who is the teacher, what category it has. And there's also an array of students. So students who have purchased this course, an array of lessons. Again, this is tagging back to the user, and the lessons is tagging back to our lessons table, and created that and updated that. So for these relations, or for Prisma in specific, there's a video again on the channel where we talk about Prisma, how to set it up in Next.js, and the different things or different connections, queries, and relations that you can create in Prisma. Link in the description or up in the card somewhere. So watch that if you're not comfortable with what I'm doing here. So let's look at our lessons table. Again, some information about the name, slug, content. This is a JSON content that we get out of our editor, whether or not the lesson is published, and our video. The video is linking again to a relation to our video platform or video model, video table. Every video has a status. This comes back from Mux. Once you upload an asset, it gives you back an asset ID, a playback ID that you can use in your Mux player to play that video. It gives you a status once you start uploading. There is a time where this video, you would have an asset ID, you would have the playback ID, but the status is preparing. So it's processing the video behind the scene before you're able to actually stream it. So the status is important for us to check to see if the status is ready for us to be able to show the video. We are using a pass-through key for the logic that we are writing between the uploads and when the webhook is triggered. So for us to be able to identify what video this was, I'm going to walk you through that setup when we get to the video section. An upload ID, a teacher ID, the duration of this video, the aspect ratio. We can use this to style our video player or our pages better. The lesson ID, so for which lesson this specific video is. and the created at and updated at. The last model that we have is tag, which is just a category of a course. So it can have many courses for this specific tag. And just so we know this, every student, as I mentioned, can have a bunch of courses, and every course can have a bunch of students. So this is a many-to-many relationship. To create many-to-many relationships in Prisma, or in this case Neon, you can have an explicit many-to-many relationship or an implicit one. The way that I'm doing it here is implicit. So once you create this, as you can see on the right-hand side on my tables, there's a course to user table that has been created automatically for me by Prisma, which is because I have an implicit relationship here. This table is going to be created automatically for us. It makes it easier to query when we have an implicit relation. But if you were to have an explicit one, you could have created another table called courses to users or users to courses. And then in there, you would store the user ID and the course ID just as a pivot table to link two different records together. This is something to note as far as our models. So we've talked about authentication. We talked about the database, Neon, Prisma, and defining our schemas. So with this out of the way, back to where we were calling this create user inside of our webhook to then create this user in our database. Similarly, if we are updating the user, we are calling the update user function. These are functions we have created in our lib folder. So from a high level in the lib, I have some user specific functions. This is using Prisma client under the hood to create a user, to get a user by ID, to update a user, or to combine the first name and last name, some utility functions that's working specifically or primarily with our user table. I've used the same convention for other stuff. So you can have Prisma here. This is generating a Prisma client and avoiding recreation of this client in local development area by storing the Prisma client in a global this object. So this is best practices from Prisma documentation to create a Prisma client in a Next.js app. And then we have other utility functions here to get a creator by ID, to get top creators. These are functions that we can call in from our server components to fetch relevant data. I have just organized them in these files here, working with courses, working with users, working with creators and whatnot, and utility functions, as you can see here, that comes in handy when we are working with this. Now we have this actions file again here as our use server actions. We're going to dive into this a bit later. For now, you just know under the lib folder, you can find this utility functions or library database access objects that allows you to work with our database. So in the next step, let's actually go and dive into our teacher layout and start from becoming a teacher, going on the teacher dashboard and creating a new course. For now, the analytics page, as I mentioned, it's just dummy data. This is coming straight out from ShatCN and ShatCN charts. There's a video on the channel where I talk about ShatCN charts. It's a new component added. It's a wrapper around recharts, which is a React chart library. And this is coming from the dashboard examples on ShatCN. So if you go to ShatCN, you can see these dashboards and these blocks that you can just copy the code. And this is basically a dummy dashboard here. So let's just start from the profile where a teacher can come in and update their profile. So under the app, we have the layout. This is our root layout where we have wrapped it with a Clerk provider. And I have provided this providers, which is a client component actually exposing all of our context providers. In this instance, I have the theme provider, which is for toggling the dark and light theme. This website comes with both themes, and also a toaster provider. This is again a ShatCN component We have a video talking about this on the channel where we can post in this toast notifications anytime that's relevant. And this toaster provider down here is just using toaster from Shatsian Sonar. This is the actual package that Shatsian is using, setting some options and also passing in our theme. So this is our providers file, which is wrapping our entire app. So let's go back to our root layout. So we have our header that we talked about, a main content, and the footer. Footer is just showing that down there. Now for our homepage, this is where we had our trending courses and also a card that shows our top creators and a card that shows our recent blogs. So with this, let's go to our teach/teach that has this shared layout. The shared layout is going to show this thing that you're seeing here. So we have this secondary navigation on the left hand side, and then we have the page content over here. This is done through this layout that's shared between all of these nested pages under this teach. Okay, so this is the layout that you can see. These are the links for profile, courses, analytics. These are the links that you can see on the side. And then whatever page we are, nested page we have here, it's going to be rendered here. So let's go to our first page, which is our profile page. So under profile, this is a server component. We are getting the user by ID. If there is no user, we are returning null. We can also redirect. And if there is a user, we are rendering this teacher profile form. This is a client component that's using React Hook Forms Zod for verification or validation of our schema to verify the form data that we need. So from a high level, we have this form, some text area for the bio, and some input type text that we are using React Hook Forms to control. There's a video on the channel. For most of the stuff that I'm talking, there is a specific individual video on the channel where we walk through the details. So if any of these concepts are complicated for you, look in the description. There's a link to individual videos that I talk about these technologies, or search on my channel to find that specific video. We have one that talks about React Hook Forms and working with them using server actions and error handling and schema verification using Zod. So we've defined a schema inside of our lib. We had this schema files where I'm defining all of my schemas. I have a teacher profile schema with what needs to be there. I'm using that to also validate the data that comes in from our form. And then in the process form, which we are passing to our handle submit, we are actually calling our update teacher profile action. So if we have defined a server action, so instead of having to write an API endpoint, which is the traditional way of submitting form data or handling form submission in Next.js, was that you would create this API endpoints. You would then, inside of your handle submit, hit that API endpoint and get the response back. Now, instead of having to create that intermediary API layer, we can use server actions, and server actions simply put are functions that you define on the server, which you can call from your server components, but also, or more importantly, from your client components. Behind the scene, they're going to create a post API endpoint, and they're going to submit this data automatically to that specific function. So let's dive into this server action for a second. Again, inside of this lib, we had this action. In order to create these actions in one file, the convention is to just export all of these functions from a file that's marked with use server up top. So let me just go all the way to the top so we can see the file from the high level. I've included all of the actions in just one file. You can also organize them in different files. They don't need to be in one file. You just need to export them from a file that has the use server directive up top. The convention is to also name it actions, and I hope this is the last one. Yes. So from a high level, again, we are having this actions.ts file. we are importing, or we are marking it as a use server. This marks all of the functions in this file as server actions. And I have imported the stuff that we needed from Stripe, from Mux, from Prisma, that allows us to work with this database or any functionality that we need to do in the server action. So for example, here we have update teacher profile action. Here we are getting the data, making sure the user is authenticated. If they're not, we are returning an error. We're going to go back to the page that's submitting this server action to see how we're handling the errors in a second. We're parsing the data that's passed to us. Even though we parse the data using React Hook forms in the front end, we're going to also parse the data in the back end as well. That's always, you shouldn't trust the data that comes from the front end. So you should always parse the data and validate your schema, your data in the back end inside your server. And once we pass this, we're going to use prisma.user.update to find that specific user from their Clerk user ID and then updating their profile. Once we do that, we're going to revalidate the teach profile page. So we reflect these changes, we purge the cache and refetch the data for this specific page. This is a pattern that you would see in almost all of our server actions. Anytime we're updating data, deleting or adding a course, we are revalidating that specific path to purge the cache and fetch fresh data and rebuild those pages. So going back to our form, if there is any error, you can return any serializable objects from your server actions. I'm returning an object with an error property, just as I've shown. If there is any errors, and if there is any error, I'm just using the toast notification from chat.cn to show that error message or a success message. So this is all there is to our teacher profile page. Now let's go to the courses page and start from this add new courses, which is going to take us to teach/courses/new, where we can create a new course. Then we're going to land on the courses page. We're going to review that from a high level, and then we're going to dive into actually editing a course content and the lessons, where we can add, delete, and update lessons. Okay, so let's go to the new course page. Let me close all of this, go back here. So inside of our app under teach, now we're going to have this new, which is for creating new courses. Under here, we're getting the tags. These are different categories that we have from our database. Again, this is a function from our courses inside of our lib that just references the tag table inside of our database and gets all of the tags. Now this is rendering this tag, so add a new course. This is going to open up this form for us where you can define a name, a slug, a description, a price, and this category, which is this tags that you can see here rendered inside of this select from chat.cn. So let's go to this new course form. Again, a client component that's using React Hook forms in a similar way with Zod as the resolver and a schema that validates the data. Now, the only interesting thing here or difference with the previous form is that once you create a name, let's say learn whatever JavaScript, this slug is created automatically. So for this, I'm using the watch function from React Hook forms and the specific name field. And every time that this changes, I am calling this create slug from name function. Again, this is defined inside of our lib. This takes the name and removes the spaces and the characters leading and trailing hyphens and creates a slug from the name. The user can go ahead and update this, but just for the ease of use, we're just automatically generating that. So that's the only difference we have there. And once they have selected the price and the category, we go ahead and hit this create new course action. In a similar fashion, we are authenticating or making sure the user is authenticated, parsing the data, and then calling prisma.create on the courses table to create a new course and pass in a teacher ID for that specific user ID, and then revalidating our courses. Now, once this goes through, we are redirecting the user back to the teach courses and that course specific course slot. So once you create this, it goes through and redirects you back to that specific course. Let's say this course that we just created, it redirects you back to this page, which is the course edit page. Now for this cards, if you click on it, it takes you to the student view. But as a teacher, anytime you wanted to go to the teacher view, you click on this little icon, or it just takes you to the teach.courses and that specific slot. So let's actually see this dynamic page that we have here. We're going to look at the dynamic courses page as well. Similar concepts, but let's just see that from a high level. Let me close this off. So inside of our app on the teach, there's courses and then all courses page. So this is this page and then a dynamic slug. So let's start from the all courses page. This we're using this get course by teacher ID. Again, a library function that's fetching all of our courses that have this specific teacher ID. We're including teacher and tag as our relation, and we're ordering the courses based on the created add field in a descending fashion. So we see the most recent course up top. Okay, so go back to the page. So we are getting all the courses and we're just rendering all of these courses and using this course item that you can see here for each course. You're getting a user. If you are a teacher, we're rendering that button up top, which is going to take you to that course edit page. Otherwise, we're just using a card component from ShadCN to render the details of the course. And then this teacher, the button that takes you to that specific course slot if you are a teacher of this course. So going back to the page, this is the all courses page from the teacher dashboard. Now for individual courses, before we dive into lessons, let's see the course page. So we are inside of a server component, a dynamic route that receives this specific slug because we named it slug. We're using that slug to get that course by slug. Again, similar fashion, a function inside of our lib finds a unique course where the slug is that slug, and we're including the relations, all the records that we have related to this specific course from lessons, teachers, and tags. So going back to our page, if we don't have a course, we just show an error message here. And if we do, we are going to render the course content and a course publish form. So let me take you to this page. This is the actual dynamic course page. So it's teach, courses, and then learn TypeScript. So you can see up top we have the details. The course publish form is this section here where we can delete or publish a course. And then we have this lessons component, which shows the lessons for this page. Before we go to the lessons, let's actually talk about this course publish form and see what this is doing here from a high level. We have these two functions, or these two buttons really here. One of them is to delete a course. One of them is to publish a course or unpublish a course or toggle the publish state of a course. So let's talk about the toggle publish. So we have passed in the course down to this component. From the toggle publish, what we're doing is again calling a server action, which is update course action. This takes in a course ID and some data, in this case whether or not the course is published. So if it was published before, we are unpublishing it, and if it was unpublished, we're going to publish this. Now in this course update action, so we are authenticating the user. We're trying to find this unique course. Here we've passed in the course ID. So in this form we've passed in the course ID. We could use that to find the course. And then we're updating this course where the course ID is this ID, and then pass in this data again, revalidating the specific paths that will be affected by this individual course. Now, one thing to keep in mind before we're calling this update course action, we're checking to see if this course has any lessons that's already published. So here I'm taking the lessons from the course. This is course.lessons. And I'm mapping over the lessons to see if I have some lessons that are published. If I don't, I'm going to show a toast notification with an error to say if you wanted to publish a course, you have to at least have one published lesson. And we don't even call this server action. This is for only when you already have a published lesson, which we're going to look into after to see how we're going to publish a lesson or add content to a lesson before publishing it. So this was the toggle publish, and then we have the delete, which is going to go ahead and delete the course. Now inside of this delete course, there's this logic where we would look to see if we have an enrolled user. So we authenticate first, then we check to see if there is a course where the ID is the ID that we have sent and the teacher ID is the authenticated user. So you can only update or delete your own courses. We're going to include the lessons and the students. And now in the second, we're going to see if there is any students in this course. So if there are enrolled students, we can't delete this course. You can unpublish the course as I showed in the beginning. So new students won't be able to purchase, but previous students would have access to this course, and you can't delete this once you have paid customers. And once we pass this or make sure that there is no students, we can go ahead and delete the actual course, but we're going to also delete all the lessons. This is automatically happening from our Prisma. So inside of our Prisma schema for every lesson, every course had an array of lessons. And when we look at this relationship in lesson where we are attaching this to a course based on the courses log, I have this on delete and on update cascade, which means if you delete a course, automatically Prisma is going to cascade that to all the lessons and delete all the lessons. So that's taken care of already. Let's go back to our server action. So all of the lessons are deleted, but the only thing we need to delete is the videos inside of our Mux storage, which we're going to talk about when we dive into the lessons. But for now, we just know that we have to delete the videos so or we don't run out of storage in our Mux account. So we map over the lessons, and if we have a video asset, we're going to call the Mux SDK and the assets endpoint to delete this specific asset ID. Again, we revalidate all the corresponding paths and redirect the user to the courses. So once you delete this course, it's going to redirect you back to the all courses page. So that's from a high level, the delete action that we have in this publish course publish form down here. The rest is just static data. As I mentioned in the beginning, for now, you can't just update any of this. It is simple. You can just turn an edit endpoint to be able to edit any of these endpoints. Now, let's talk about the lessons. So let me just close this. So the last thing we had here is this lessons here. So let's go inside of our lesson component. Now, from a high level, you have this form where you can add a new lesson and a list of all the lessons that allows you to delete a lesson or edit a lesson. So for toggling this form that enables you to add a new lesson, we're using local state. So this is a client component with a local state, adding lessons. We are getting the lessons, sorting them based on the created ad. You can also do this when you're fetching data coming in from your database. I'm actually doing that here. So back inside of our course where we are getting our lessons. So back in this courses log page, if I go up and get course by slug, this is already ordering by created ad. So what this is doing is finding a course that has that slug. It is including the teacher, including the lessons and the tag. But for the lessons, I'm including the video. So it's nested relationships. This is how you would do it in Prisma. And you can also reorder or order the array of lessons in place in this course that comes back nested by created ad. So this line that we have here on this lessons form is unnecessary. This is for prior to ordering it when we are fetching it from the database. You can do it either there when you're fetching it from the database using Prisma or ordering it here inside of your client component. I would do it in Prisma, not here, but you have it here as a reference as well. Now, The toggle form is just going to set adding lesson. So just going to toggle this form. And then as far as the form goes, if we are adding, we have this new lesson form. So let's look inside of this. For the new lesson, again, we are using React Hook Forms, Zod as a resolver, similar concept, a name turned into a slug automatically, a process form, which when the data is validated, is going to call this create new lesson action. This is going to use our authentication to make sure that this user is authenticated. The course actually belongs to this specific user, so that's the teacher ID. Parsing the data that comes back, and if that's the case, we're going to then create a new lesson, revalidate the path, and then we're done. So that's what we're doing in this new lesson form. Again, concepts repeating here in terms of implementing React Hook Forms with a process or handle submit of, calling a server action, showing a toast notification if there's anything wrong, and a success if it goes through. So that was the new lessons form. And then we get the sorted lessons. In this case, the lessons are coming sorted from our backend data query. And then we're showing every lesson over here and two buttons, one to delete a lesson and the other one that points us to a different dynamic page that we can get access to editing that specific lesson. So let's talk about the delete lesson action. It's easier, and then we're going to dive into that specific page where we can edit the lesson content. So delete lesson action takes in a lesson ID down here. So we take in a lesson ID, authenticate the user, find this specific lesson, make sure that the teacher ID is actually this authenticated user, so we don't update or delete other people's lessons. And down here, we're going to delete the lesson. We're going to also check to see if there's any video associated with this lesson, and we delete that one as well. Now we need to do one thing more, and that is if the lesson that we deleted is the last lesson we had, we have to also unpublish the course, because remember, a course cannot be published if we don't have a published lesson. So we are just checking with this count query from Prisma to see how many lessons we have where the lesson is published. And if the published lessons are 0, we're going to update the course and set it to unpublished. So just an extra check here once we're deleting a lesson, to delete the asset from Mux, the video asset, and also check to see if it was the last published lesson, and therefore we're going to unpublish the course. So therefore new students can go ahead and buy the course without any lessons. Again, revalidating the path. And then after this, if you're passing a redirect to, we can redirect back. So if you're deleting this lesson from here, it doesn't do anything, it stays on the page. But you can also delete the lesson from the lessons page, which we're going to see in a second. And there I'm passing this redirect to path. So once I delete this, I don't want to stay on this page. I want to redirect back to the previous page. So if it has this redirect to passed into the server action, after revalidating the data, it's going to redirect us back to the course page where we can add new lessons. So back here. So that was the server action for deleting a course. Now, when we want to update a course, this is going to take us to teach course courses slug, so dynamic course, and then lessons, and then lesson slug. So once you click here, up top, you can see I'm going to teach courses, learn TypeScript, lessons, and then the introduction, which is the slug for this specific lesson. So let's go to this page. Let me close all of this. Again, inside of our app, teach courses, specific courses slug, and then we have the lessons and the lesson slug and a page here. So we are getting the lesson by slug from a high level inside of our server component, and we are passing it down to this lesson content form. So again, this is the similar pattern. We have a server component that fetches the data and passes this to our server, to our client components, specifically in these instances, forms where we need client-side interactivity. So let's dive into this lesson content form. So from a high level, we have this free preview field, the publish field, the lesson video and the lesson content. So let's look into this. Let me close these functions. So from a high level, again, we have the save changes and the delete button up top. This delete lesson action is going to call the same server action that we had. Here I'm passing in this path. This is the redirect to path that I just talked about. So after deleting this lesson, it's going to redirect us back to the course with that slug. So that's easy. Inside of our save changes, we have this handle update lesson. We're going to look into this in a second. Let's just scroll down and see what else we have. We have a form. Inside of our form, we have a switch for whether or not this is free. That's called the access. We have another switch that controls whether or not the course is published. These are calling in this local states for it is published and toggle is published. We're going to look into that in a second. And then if we have any videos and the status is ready, again, I mentioned when we upload a video to Mux, it starts processing it. And once the process is done and it's ready for streaming, there is a ready status that gets emitted through a webhook that we use to update our instance or our database so we know whether or not it's ready. I'm rendering a Mux player that is using the playback ID and some metadata to just render or stream the video. Now, on top of that, I'm also using this Mux uploader to be able to render or change this video, and this is hooked up to this change video. But before we get to the change video logic, let's talk about the Mux uploader or when we do not have a video. So when we scroll down here, you can see if the lesson does not have a video and the video status is not preparing, because sometimes we don't have a video, but we are preparing a video. So in those instances, we're just going to show an animation or a bouncing background that says it's preparing, as you just saw in the demo. But if we do not have a video and we're not preparing, so Mux is not processing any video, we want to show the uploader that you have seen in the demo. So if we go to the add lesson, let's say why TypeScript is the next lesson, for lack of a better name. Let's add this lesson. And if I go to edit this lesson now, so we're going to see this uploader area here where you can drag and drop a file or click this button to select a file. And this is the Mux uploader component. Now, if you head to Mux and to the documentation, you can see how to upload a video here. There is a section that says Mux uploader for the web. You can use this to upload your files. This is going to render this drag and drop area automatically for you. This is status, error handling, and this upload button, all in the same web component. It also comes in with a React component. So it's pretty easy to implement. Now in the code, I have two examples here. The first example you see here is the default uploader that you get out of Mux. So let's just comment this back in for a second. If I can comment this one out for a second. So this one doesn't have any customization in that you just pass in an endpoint to it. And this is the endpoint where you would want to upload your files. We're going to generate this upload endpoint in a second using a server action here. But before we get there, so this uploader is going to render this area that you have seen in the documentation automatically for you, like such a thing there. And then I have passed in this custom component, a button here, to just change the way that this button looks. But it doesn't stop there. You can customize this component as much as you want, and that's what I have done down here. So not to overcomplicate things, I've already created or left this simple version up here too. But if you want to customize this further, There's a lot that you can do. Again, in the documentation, there's a section that you can that talks about customizing the look and feel. You can customize it based on the different sub components that already is in this Mux uploader. You can customize it based on Tailwind CSS styles or the style tag. There's a lot that you can do, and I have used some of it here. For example, I have this the drop component. This is the drag and drop area. I have the Mux uploader nested inside, the status, and I'm designing them differently. The progress bar that I'm showing, the select is the file select, and the specific button that I'm showing inside. So it's just customizing the look and feel. The functionality is the exact same thing that you would have inside of this simple one. Now, the only thing you need to know here is for this uploader to work, you need to generate an upload URL. And how am I doing this? Well, you can either pass that URL here to the endpoint directly, or you can pass an async function that returns a promise that resolves to that URL. And this is what I'm doing here. This is only creating this URL once the user selects a file. So let's see what we're doing inside this create upload server action. So here I'm authenticating the user. I'm finding the lesson with this lesson ID and this teacher ID. Again, I want to make sure that this lesson belongs to this specific user. If there's no lesson, I'm redirecting to sign in. You can redirect back to the course page or whatever. And if I already have an asset ID, I want to delete that asset ID. So assuming that I'm calling this upload URL from that change button, which we're going to look into in a second, that just renders another hidden uploader for us. But if I already have an ID there, I want to delete that and then upload a new one. But how we are going to create an upload is through this SDK, so Mux Video Uploads.create, and we're going to create an endpoint where we can hit and upload our video. So a playback policy of public, meaning that this can be publicly played, and encoding tier. There's two different encoding tiers in Mux. There's a video on the channel where I talk about Mux as the video platform, different encodings, in details of how to implement this in Next.js, how to use it. There's another video on the channel about the Next Video Player, which is an easiest way to play videos inside of your application. So I'm going to link into those videos in the description, so you can watch those to understand how Mux works, how to implement it in Next.js, and then come back here. But to create an upload, so you can pass in these data, and this is the pass-through key that I mentioned in the beginning, where we were talking about our Prisma schemas, that we're going to create a pass-through key for this specific upload to then read this same pass-through key to find that specific individual video that was uploaded and sent back to us through the webhook to connect it to the same lesson and the same course and the same record inside of our database. So in the cross origin, which is the last, you can pass in your domain once you publish. So on my published production domain will be learn.dev, but you can just leave it as a start. This is going to accept requests from any domains in this case. So once I create this upload, I'm going to create or upsert a record in my video table. So if I already have an asset there, I'm going to update it with a status waiting. Now, status waiting means that now we have the upload URL. We're just waiting for a file to be uploaded. We have the pass-through key and upload ID. This is to, if you were to track this a specific upload that you created through the webhooks. We're not doing anything with it here, but I just left it here for good measures. I'm deleting the asset ID, playback ID, and duration because I already had a video, and I'm now changing it. So I delete all the asset IDs that I have in my record. I'm not creating a new record because this is the same lesson. I'm just updating the pass-through and deleting all the asset IDs and playback IDs that was from Mux before. And if this is not an update, it's a new record that I'm creating using the upsert function from Prisma. I'm saying if you didn't find a record with this lesson ID, then go ahead and create one. Again, set the status to waiting, set the pass-through key, and the pass-through key is just a UUID that I created, so I can just connect the records and the assets when the webhook comes back. An upload ID, the teacher ID, and the lesson ID, and then I return this upload.url. So I return this URL back to the Mux uploader. Mux uploader is going to now use that authenticated URL we created to upload our file to our account. Now inside of our account in Mux, you have access to different environments. So I have different environments here, one for development. I've created this one for development. You have to bring in your API keys through your access tokens. So you set this already inside of your application. Again, back inside of our local example, we have the Mux ID and the secret, and then the token for the webhook, which we're going to talk about next. Okay, so this is going to then upload this video. Now, once the video gets uploaded, it starts syncing or processing to be able to stream it. And that's when you're going to have a status of preparing. So when we are preparing the video status is preparing. We're just showing a solid animating or pulsing background to just say that the video is processing, that this may take a few minutes. Now, once the video is finished processing, again, Mux has some webhooks you can set. So under settings, there are different webhooks that you can set. Again, I have 2 webhooks set up here in my production, in my development environment, one for the main domain and one for the development. And what this does is that anytime that we are creating an asset or updating, or when the status changes, we can update or record inside of our database. So let's go to the app, to the API, and to Mux and see what we're doing here. Let me just close all of this before I open this up. So inside of our webhook, again, a post endpoint, all of these webhooks would send a post request to whatever endpoint you set here. So I've set API webhooks /Mux. We get a post event or route handler here. Again, in a similar fashion, we check to see if this is coming from Mux using this webhook secret that we set in our local environment variable. We read the payload for the request body, and then we verify the signature using this Mux SDK. Already comes with utility functions you can use to verify the signature of your webhook. If it goes through, I'm getting the payload out of the event, and I'm switching over different cases. So if an asset is created, if an asset is ready, if the upload is canceled, these are the 3 different events that I'm responding to. So asset upload created or canceled is when we are just creating an upload URL. So if it is canceled, I'm just marking, because I've already created that record inside of our video table, I just want to mark that as canceled. I'm not doing anything specific there, but just so I know that I'm not waiting for any upload, is canceled, because a user can cancel an upload. Now in asset creation, this is when we have generated the URL endpoint and the user went ahead and selected the file, and we are starting to upload. Now the upload is done, and we're waiting for the asset to be created and the asset to be ready. So once the asset is created and it's processing, we're going to receive this webhook data and update our endpoint. So we're going to find that specific video, and we're going to use that same pass-through key that we set inside of our database, but we also passed in to Mux when we were creating the upload URL. Now, using that URL endpoint that we created in Mux that had that pass-through key, when we start uploading the asset, Mux is going to create an asset for us, send the webhook back, but it also sends that pass-through back. So we're going to use that pass-through ID to then find this video record that we just created, and we're going to include the lessons and the course in this video that we get back. If we don't have any video, we send a 400 response back. Now, anytime that you send a 200 response back to a webhook, the sender understands that as success. Anytime that it receives a message other than 200 or the success messages, it can also be 300, I guess, it considers that as a mistake or as an error, and it tries to resend that webhook again. So if we don't have a video, something might be wrong. So we're making Mux to send this again. And if we do have a video, but the status is not ready, we're going to update our record to say data.status, and we're going to just update our record with the asset ID that comes back from Mux. So once the user selects the file and it starts the upload, the first thing that Mux does is to create an asset. for which we're going to have the asset ID and the playback ID. At this point, we have the asset ID, we have the playback ID, but it's still not ready to be streamed. So the status is not ready, it's preparing, but we have the asset ID and the playback ID. So if we update our instance or our video in our database with this new updates, I'm going to revalidate the path again for that specific lesson, for that specific video. And similarly, if we have an asset ready, so once the asset is created, once Mux created an asset ID and playback ID, send a webhook for us, we updated the record. Now it starts processing it. Once the process is ready, it's going to submit another event or emit another event, which is asset ready. This is when an asset is now ready to be streamed or played back. Again, same thing. We're finding the video through the pass-through key that's sent back to us through the webhook data, and we're updating this time the status of the video. We already have the asset ID and the playback ID. We are updating the status, the duration, and the aspect ratio. We're revalidating the path, and we're done. So these are the 3 different events we're listening from Mux that is going to then update the status of our video inside of our database. And on our form, when the video is ready, so we receive this webhook in the backend, turn the status to ready, we revalidated the path, which then turns this into now showing the Mux player. Remember, if I go to our components and the lesson content form here, anytime that we have the lesson video ready and also the playback ID, we're going to render the Mux player over here. Now up top, just to show you from a high level what we're doing other than this buttons, we are holding some local states. Again, this is for the free, the published version, whether or not we have a video, the lesson has a video, whether or not the video is ready, whether or not the course is ready to be published. Again, when you want to save the changes here, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, it is going to look to see if the lesson has a video. We can have a logic to see or to require a lesson to either have a video or have some content. Maybe we have some courses where we only have just written content and no videos. But for now, we're just looking to see if we have a video and the video is ready, and only then we can publish this lesson. So inside of the toggle is published. This is just looking to see if you're published, we're setting it to false. And if it is false and we want to publish, it looks to see if we can actually publish this lesson, and only then sets it to true. This is to just toggle this. So if I don't have any videos here and I toggle this to go to publish, it says upload a video first to publish this lesson. So that's to take care of that toast notifications. So whenever we're publishing this, we are already preventing them from hitting publish if they don't have any videos. And then in the handle update, what we're trying to do here is to get the content of whatever they have inside of this editor. We're going to talk about the editor in a second. This editor, which we're holding an instance of here inside of this local state. So we have this editor here. I'm going to dive into the editor in a second, but we have this instance of the editor. It exposes a get JSON function on the editor. Again, there's a video on the channel where I talk about this editor specifically from Novel, which is a tip-tap editor that allows you to create this Notion style editor that you can hit / to bring in commands, to add in headings and whatnot. So you can store or you can get the content of this in HTML format or in JSON format. I'm getting in JSON format, and then stringifying that JSON to be able to then insert that into my database. And I'm using the same editor in a read-only mode in the lesson content. So when a student is actually viewing this lesson, they see the video, and I'm rendering the content inside of the editor, but just mark it as read-only. So let's look at this update lesson action. Then we're going to talk about the editor because it's a major part of this lesson in the next step. So update lesson action takes a lesson ID, takes the content that we got out of the editor, the is free and is published. Now, the only thing that you might wonder is that, well, how about the video? Well, if you upload a video, we've already shown that this is already talking to our database and it's already updating the database accordingly. So this is not part of our update form. Anytime that you select a video here, it automatically updates this lesson. Anytime that you hit change, it deletes the previous video and updates your database automatically with the video. The only thing that you need to change or save once you edit is these three fields: the free preview, the publish, and the content. So that's what we're sending to this update lesson action. So let's look into here. Again, authenticating the user, making sure that the user is the teacher of this course. And once that's the case, we are going to then update the course with this data that was passed in. Now, again, if through this update, we have marked this lesson as unpublished, we have to check to see if this was the last lesson that was published. We need to, in that case, then unpublish the course itself as well. Once this is done, we revalidate the paths and we're done with this server action, which is updating our lesson. So if there's any errors, we toast notification, the error, and if not, we just say lesson updated successfully. So that's as far as updating a lesson or marking it as a free preview, publishing it, and adding content to it. Now let's go to the editor and see that editor from a high level as well. So down here inside of our form, we are rendering this editor. We're sending the lesson to it, a set editor function, so that we can store an instance of our editor in this instance. So we can call the getJSON function on it to get the content back. And whether or not this is a teacher view, again, I'm using this to mark this editor as read only because we are using the same editor in the course content as well. So let's dive into this editor from a high level. We are bringing extensions and selectors from novel component. Again, watch the video that I have on the channel where I dive deeper into this. So these are different plugins and extensions we're importing that enables us to have this slash commands, to have this bubble menu. Under the hood, it's using tip-tap to render this editor. So we have this editor root component and the content inside of it. We can pass in our options and some props to this component. This passes to the underlying tip-tap editor. So immediately render false. This is important when you are server rendering inside Next.js application to minimize the hydration errors. So this is not going to render your editor on the server. It only waits to render this on the client. The initial content is whatever content that's already inside of our database. We get it here. You can also store the content as they're writing here inside the local storage. I left it here. So you can update the content. So whenever they're changing here, you can store it in the local storage so that if they refresh the page, they don't lose the content before saving the changes to the database. I have removed that functionality, but left the code here. You can just uncomment this. And we're also debouncing the update. So it is not going to save to local storage on every character, but it's debouncing it every 500 seconds. You can just change whatever amount of seconds that you want to debounce it. And the way that we're doing it is through this handle update function that's passed to this on update. So it gets the editor instance. I've commented this out, but it debounces this editor. On the debounce, it does something very similar in that it gets the JSON, if you can see over here, and it stores it in the local storage. So again, if the user refreshes the page, they don't lose the content that they've already written here, but they haven't saved to the database. So you can enable that if you wanted to. And then there is another onCreate function or event listener. So once this editor is created, again, we get the instance of the editor. I'm calling the set editor. This is the set function that we passed in from our lesson page to hold the instance of this editor inside of our lesson page or lesson form, so we can get the JSON data when we want to save this. And also, if I'm not on the teacher view, I am getting the editor and the set editable content to false, which just turns this editor to a read-only editor. So if I go to the courses, or better yet, to the My Learning, and if I go to this course that I've already purchased, you can see here, I see the video, but down here, this is the same editor that I had, but I just set the read-only to false. So the user can't edit it, but we're using the same editor to render the content the same way that we have in our teacher platform. Now, there's different ways that you can do this. You can get the JSON data that you already have. You can get turn it into HTML or generate HTML from that and render it here and style it, use it, Tailwind, the Pro's Tailwind topography package. But just to make it the same way that the teacher is writing it there, or not to duplicate any styling, I've used the editor itself. There's different ways, again, you can do this. This is the way that I have chosen here. So the two functions really that we care about, other than the stuff that you need to pass into your TipTap editor, such as your Tailwind classes, is these two, on update and on create. And that was our editor. So back into our teaching platform or layout. For every course or for every lesson, we have different fields, the video and the content. We can save this through server actions to our database, which in turn allows us to publish a lesson that is going to be visible inside of our course. So let me go to another course. For example, let's go to Learn Next.js. And if I go to one of these already published lessons, for example, and mark this as unpublished and save changes, this is going to update the lesson, turn this into a draft. And now with that, from the My Learning, if a student now goes into this lesson, well, we still see this lesson, which means when we are fetching this course, so let's go to our lib and then courses, where we are getting the course by slug. We are including the lessons belonging to this specific course. Now we need to limit this where is published is true. So let's just save this. And if I save that, this is removed. Now the third lesson, which is now unpublished, is going to be removed from here. But we should be able to see this inside of our teacher dashboard, which means we need to update this function to say whether or not this is teacher view. Again, if it is teacher view, we don't care to just show the published ones. We want to see all the lessons. But if it is the student view, we only want to get the published ones. So there's a minor update that we need to do this code. I'll update this code, and by the time you see the repo, it will be updated. So that's where the difference comes in, because if I don't update this function for the teacher view now inside of our Learn Next.js, we no longer see that unpublished or draft lesson. So with this out of the way, we have covered all of the teach layout or teachers layout forms and lessons. So we can go to the courses. This is a very simple concept here. So inside of our app, inside of our courses, we have this all courses page. We are rendering this courses component. We are receiving all the courses from what we fetched over here and the tags, and we are rendering this query selector, a search button, and a category selector, and this sort functionality, which is doing this all client side. Another improvement we can do to this is to pass this search query parameters up in the URL to communicate this through our client component back to our server component and then refetch the data. We have videos on the channel where we show how to search using server actions and actually the URL state to communicate between client and server components. I'm going to link it in the card and the description. We also have the sorting and pagination specific videos on the channel. So I haven't done that here. This is only using client-side search and sorting functionality, but you can watch those videos if you wanted to do it server-side. So again, we're getting the queries, the selected tags, and we're just filtering our array of courses based on our selected filters and the sorting, whether or not we have it. And then down here, we are rendering the inputs for the query, the popover, that's for this category, and the sorting mechanism. And then at the end, we're just rendering the array of courses and some course items based on whatever filter that was passed through to this array. For each course item, again, we're just rendering the content of the course and also this button that allows the teachers. So I only see my own courses with this button that allows me to go to the edit page and directly edit this inside of my teacher's dashboard. Now from here, let's also go to the individual course page, which is courses slug, before we get to the checkout, which the Stripe integration comes into place. Let's just check in the page over here. So this is a dynamic page. Again, we're getting the slug, which is the specific slug for the course. In this case, we have courses and then learn TypeScript. We're getting a user ID just so we can check to see if the user is signed in or not. We only allow signed in users to purchase the course. I'm already signed in, so I can purchase the course. So down here, we're rendering the content of the course. The course purchase form is here. We're going to look into that in a second. The course lessons, which we have to look at for this preview functionality that we have, we're going to look into that. And then the information about the creator or the teacher of the course is all down here, which you can see down there. So let's go up and start from the course purchase form. So inside of the course purchase form is where we're actually creating a checkout session in our Stripe integration and then redirecting the user back to that checkout session to be able to purchase that course. So let's just look at this from a high level. If the user is not signed in, we tell them to sign in to purchase. We are using the sign in button, whether or not they're signed in, using this drop-in Clerk component. If you're loading the user, we show the loading button here. If we load the user and they have already purchased this course because we mapped over the learning courses of that specific student to find a course with this specific ID. So if they've already purchased the course, we're going to show a button that says continue learning. This is going to take them to the learning dashboard. And this refund course is just for development purposes. So I wanted to refund the course to take it out of the students' records to be able to purchase it again. But in reality, this doesn't do the job that it needs to do, meaning that it needs to talk to Stripe to refund the course and the payment back to the user. It's not doing that. It's just removing it from our database. We're still using the Stripe in test mode for this. So this won't work in production, but I have it here for development purposes. And once there's a user ID but they haven't purchased, we have a button here that allows them to purchase. Now if we're loading, it says we're loading the Stripe checkout session. Otherwise it just says the purchase course, which we can see here. Now once they click this, we're calling this handle purchase up top that we had. Now inside of this handle purchase, we are managing some local state to know that we're creating this Stripe checkout session and then redirecting the user there. So how are we doing this? Well, we're using a server action, create Stripe checkout session. So let's look at this server action. We're authenticating the user, finding this specific course, whether or not it exists, and then finding the user. If the user already has this course in their account, we say you've already enrolled in this course, so we don't allow them to purchase it again. Otherwise, we're going to set some headers and we're going to create a checkout session for Stripe. So you have to install Stripe. Again, there's a video on the channel where I talk about Stripe implementation in Next.js. But from a high level, you create a checkout session and redirect the user to that checkout session. That checkout session needs a line item, so an item, a product with a price that they can use to pay, a success URL, which Stripe is going to redirect the user back to, and a cancel URL in case they cancel the payment. They have to land back inside your own application. So you pass this data in to create a checkout session. It gives you a URL back. You send this URL to your client side and then redirect the user to that URL, which we're going to do in the second step. So mode payment. If we already have a user, if the user has a Stripe customer ID, remember in our Prisma schema, we've already set this. If the user has already purchased the course from us, we're going to use that customer ID, not to create a new customer. If we don't have a customer ID, we're going to use their email as a customer information, allow whether or not you want to allow promotional code, whether or not you want to create an invoice for this, and the line items, which is the most important part of it. Quantity 1, what is the price data or product data? The currency, the details is the course name, description is course description, and then the unit amount, which is in cents, in this case, the course price, which is a number times 100. This is the way that Stripe accepts the price or the unit amount for this specific line item. The success URL, we're using the origin. This is wherever the request came in from, and this is where we needed to access the headers from Next.js, and the origin header that gives us the origin URL where this request was coming from. So we're accessing that origin, going back to courses log, and checkout, and session ID as a query string and a checkout session ID, which is going to be filled in automatically by Stripe. So once the user goes through this checkout session, so they click on this purchase course, it redirects them, it creates this Stripe session, redirects them back to this Stripe, and once this goes through, they're going to be redirected back to this checkout page, which we're going to see in a second, and Stripe is going to pass in the session ID, which we're going to use and then retrieve this session ID to know who the user was, what the course was, and then update our database. And if they cancel the payment, well, we're going to send them back to the course slug page. So if I just go back, I'm just going to land on the where I started this whole journey of checking out. So inside of the server action, once we create this Stripe checkout session, we pass the session ID back in the response of whoever called the server action. So where did we call the server action? Well, we call it from this course purchase form. Inside of this handle purchase, we were calling this create a Stripe checkout session, right? So we created this based on the course ID. We got the session ID back or some errors. If we don't have any session ID or error, we're going to just throw an error. But if we do have the session ID, we're going to use a client-side Stripe library, which you can get out of this Stripe.js. We're going to load Stripe on the front end to get the instance of our Stripe. And then on it, there is a method called redirect to checkout. And then we pass in the session ID. So we retrieved the session, or we created the session ID or the session inside of our server action, passed the session ID to our front end where we were handling this submission, and then we're going to call this redirect to checkout, pass that session ID, so it automatically redirects. Another thing you can do easier than this is just to get the session.url. So inside of our server action, this session that comes back from calling our Stripe checkout session.create, this session has a property called URL on it. So instead of passing the session ID to your front end, you can pass in the URL to your front end and just use window.location.href and set it to that URL. That's another way to do it. I like to do it with a Stripe with this redirect to checkout session, pass in the session ID. Now, if any error happens while we're redirecting, we can catch it here and show the instance of that error with this toast.error. And finally, if everything goes well, we set the loading to false, and then the user will be inside of our checkout session. Again, once we go to the checkout session and we complete that session, we're going to hit back our success URL, and that's the URL that we set here. So its origin, wherever that was coming from, courses, the dynamic slug, and the checkout. So here inside of our routes in the app, in the courses, in this slug, other than the page that shows this individual course page on the right hand side, there's this checkout, which is a success checkout kind of page here, where in the beginning, in the demo, I showed that it shows a success message, but we're also using that to receive the data from the session ID that's passed in or filled in automatically from Stripe, so that we can update our user with this newly purchased course. So let's see how we're doing that. So inside of this form, we're just rendering the detail of the session. The payment was successful. Thank you for joining. The details of the product they purchased and the currency that they have paid. The same stuff that you see in the beginning of the demo. But the more important stuff happens here. So we have this slug. This is the course slug, and we have this session ID as a search parameter, as a query string up in the URL, because that's the success URL we set when we created a session in Stripe. Now we get that session ID. If there's no session ID, we redirect. But if there's a session ID, we want to retrieve this checkout session, this successful checkout session. For this, I've created another server action, which is going to take that session ID, and then it's going to call the Stripe checkout session retrieve and retrieve that specific session. We're expanding the payment intent. This is going to give us the details of the product and also the details of the payment that was used to complete this session, so we can use that success message or success page on the client side. So out of this session that we retrieve from Stripe, there are two important stuff that we want to get out of the metadata that we passed that I forgot to mention. So when we were creating a Stripe session, this is in the previous step, before we redirect the user to Stripe, we created a session. Now inside of this session where we created, we passed in some metadata, the course ID and the user ID. Now when the user is redirected back to the success page after the checkout session was succeeded, we receive this metadata as well, where we can then use to update our user. So we're getting the course ID and user ID out of the metadata, and then we are finding that course and we are finding the user. If the user already had that course, so if they landed on that success page or refreshed that page, we don't want to keep updating the user. We're just going to return the session and the first lesson is log, which is just going to take them to their learning dashboard. And if they don't have that course inside of their learning courses, well, we're going to update the user and we're going to set up this Stripe customer ID, which comes from the session that we retrieved from Stripe. And we're going to add this course ID in the connection to their learning courses. Again, there was a many-to-many relationship between learning courses in a user and the courses. And the way that you would connect the two relations together is using this connect in Prisma. So you would connect this course ID to this user ID. So now this user has this course ID in their learning courses array. Again, here, something that you can optionally do is to send a confirmation email to say, hey, thank you very much for your purchase. This is how you can access your course. If you have questions, do this and that. And you can also optionally update Clerk user metadata so that you can hold the learning courses in terms of just making it easier for checking in if a user has access to this course or not. When you are getting the user data out of Clerk based on the authenticated user, they could check the metadata and see if it includes a specific course. I'm not doing it here, but if you want to do that, there's a video on the channel where I talk about updating metadata in your Clerk user so you can access these type of stuff like Stripe checkout ID, customer ID, or in this case, courses IDs or learning courses to make it easier to decide whether or not the user should have access to a specific course. And then we revalidate the path. So back in the checkout page again, we are on the success page. We used this session ID that was passed in as a query string via Stripe to retrieve the session ID if the user already had this course in their learning courses. So they just landed on this success page. If they refresh this page, they already have it. We already added it, so we're not going to do it again. If they don't have it, we're going to update the user record, connecting it to this course and also passing in the Stripe customer ID. So this is what we're doing in this page. But for good measures, we're also listening to webhooks coming from Stripe. So if for whatever reason they didn't get redirected to this page or something went wrong when they got redirected to this page, well, they purchased, the session went through, but we never updated our database to give them the access to this course. For that matter, I am also listening to Stripe webhooks. So inside of our app, inside of our API, inside of Stripe, we have yet another post handler for webhooks that come in from Stripe. Now here, in a similar fashion, we are verifying the signature of this request to make sure that this is coming from our own Stripe. Again, you would set a Stripe webhook inside of our .env.example. You can see here we have this Stripe webhook secret. You could get this from your Stripe dashboard. So if I go to Stripe here, I don't know if I'm logged in or not. Here we go. You can create a new project. I've gone ahead and created this learn.dev. it starts from a test mode unless you activate payments. Under this developers section is where you can get your API keys, and also this webhook section. So again, we have two domains, one for the production learn.dev and the other one for our local dev server through ngrok. As you can see here, I have a custom domain. That's why you can see my name. Otherwise, ngrok is just going to randomly give you a domain. You can also set a persistent domain so it doesn't change over time. There's a video on the channel where I talk about implementing ngrok or bringing your local dev out in the world through ngrok. So check that video if you want to know how to set it up, because when working with webhooks, you would need ngrok, whether it's Mux or Stripe or your Clerk. You would need to listen to webhooks to be able to update your user data, and you would need an HTTPS URL or a public URL that your services can hit or send requests to. So inside of each one of these webhooks, there is a secret. Again, similar fashion, we are verifying the signature of our request to make sure this is coming in from our own Stripe account. And then once we make sure that's the case, we again are getting the user ID and course ID out of the metadata. So Stripe not only sends this metadata back to that session that you retrieved on the success page, it also includes the metadata in the webhook data that sends that you can use to check to see if the user needs to be updated. So I'm listening for one event here, and that's checkout session.completed. So once the session, Stripe session is completed, I would receive this post request with the data, and I'm going to find this specific user with this Clerk user ID, and I'm including the learning courses so I can check to see if they already have this learning courses. So if they landed on the success page and have already added this course to the learning courses, we don't want to do it again. But if this, for whatever reason, doesn't exist or something went wrong when they got redirected to our success page, we're going to update the user, give them the access or connection to that course ID, and also setting the Stripe customer ID and sending a response with the status of 200 back so Stripe knows that all is well. Now, the last thing that is remained for us to discuss is this lesson and the preview functionality that we have. So let's go back inside of our app, inside of courses, each individual course. This is the page, and inside of this dynamic page, we are rendering this course lessons component that receives this specific course, maps over each lesson, rendering a list item. And if the lesson is free, we're rendering this lesson preview dialog. If not, we're just rendering this lock button. Now, this lesson preview dialog is just a dialog from chat.cn. So if I dive into this, there's just wholesale a dialog from chat.cn component. It comes in with a trigger that is the trigger that we see. So if I go back to my learning, let's say go to Next.js course where we have actually a courses, Next.js, we have a lesson that has the preview. So this is the trigger button from the dialog, which this just opens up the dialog. And the content of the dialog, as you can see here, if we have a video playback ID with a status of ready, we are just rendering the Mux player. Again, this is a drop-in React component from Mux that allows you to pass in a playback ID and stream in your videos. So we are just rendering that inside of this dialog, as easy as that. Now, alternatively, we could also bring in the notes using the editor here. So this dialog can be scrollable where you see the video, but you can also see the content of the course down here as well. And this is all there is to this lessons. The ones that are not marked as free preview, they don't have this dialog. And this button doesn't do anything. The other ones just open up this preview. And that's a wrap, folks, for this video. It was a long video for a full-blown project that we created using Next.js as our framework, Neon as our database, Clerk for authentication, and Mux as our video hosting platform. For the next steps or how you can improve this, I have included some stuff here. So right now, there is no logic to pay out our teachers. There are different ways that we can do this, and maybe we follow this up with future videos where we add a platform to our Stripe where we can onboard new teachers for free or on a subscription, and then set them a payout plan so we get a percentage, or charge them a platform fee as the platform for any course that the teacher sells. So that's something that you can do, or we're going to do in future. Stripe has a platform. It's the Stripe Connect. So it already has this platform built into Stripe. You can use it. I have built e-commerce shops using this, where you can bring in different sellers, just like Amazon. You can be the platform, bringing in sellers and buyers, and allowing them to trade on your platform and charging them a platform fee. Now, edit the course details, as I mentioned, inside of our Teach platform or the Teach layout, where you go to a specific course. Once you create a course, you can't really edit this description and prices, which doesn't make sense. It would be easy with the same concepts of having a React hook form and a server action to update the course details after it is published as well. So that's something we can do. Add lesson notes to the lesson preview model. We've already talked about this. So when a student who hasn't purchased a course wants to preview a specific lesson, right now only sees the video for the lesson, they can also scroll to see the notes for that lesson. We can add that using the same editor that we have. We already have the content stored in our database, so we just need to render the editor with the same content. Course pre-sale feature. Right now, to publish a course, you need to have a price. There is this feature that you can have to pre-sell a course. So before you create a course, you publish it, you ask people to join a wait list, and depending on the response you get or whether or not people are interested, you can pre-sell this course. We can add that functionality to be able to publish a course without a price, but mark it as a pre-sale. That's an interesting feature. Add blogging. Again, in the homepage, you see these blogs over here. They're just dummy data. We can add the blogging feature to this site, so it makes it a full-blown learning platform. That's interesting as well. We can add a pro plan for teachers. Right now, anybody can come in and start teaching. Maybe we allow teachers to create 1, 2, 3 courses, and then for more courses, they have to subscribe to a paid plan to be able to create more courses. So the sky is the limit. This is a very powerful platform that we have created here together. You can extend it however you want. Some of these features maybe I do in a part 2, part 3 videos later on to enrich this platform even more. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. I once again thanks the sponsors of this video, Mox as a video hosting platform, Clerk authentication, and Neon as a database for sponsoring this project and supporting my work on the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.